The candles shook as if they, too, feared what the night would bring. Their flames trembled against the silk-covered walls, throwing long shadows that moved like silent witnesses. Lady Seraphine Ashbreer stood alone before the tall mirror, her wedding gown heavy upon her body, white and flawless like a lie she had been trained to wear. Ivory silk clung to her frame. Pearls rested at her throat like a chain. The room meant for a bride felt more like a cell prepared for judgment. Each tick of the clock cut into her nerves. Time was dragging her closer to a moment she had dreaded for years, not weeks. Her hands shook as she reached up to the high collar of her nightdress, carefully checking that it covered everything. Every inch of skin had to remain hidden, always hidden. She had heard the whispers, even while walking down the aisle. She brings nothing but her name. A ruined earl's daughter. A cold bargain for a colder duke. London society had watched closely as Lord Caspian Dunley, Duke of Westland, placed the ring on her finger. His face had been carved from stone. No smile, no warmth, his eyes, grey and distant, never softened. The vows felt less like promises and more like terms agreed upon by strangers. The wedding breakfast had been a funeral disguised as a celebration. Toasts rose and fell like nails, sealing the coffin of every foolish hope Seraphine might once have carried. She had smiled when required. She had lowered her eyes when expected. She had survived. Now she stood in the Duchess's chamber, her chamber, waiting for the final seal of the contract. The fire hissed in the hearth, but the cold clung to her bones. Her maid had already left, unable to hide her pity. Rose water still lingered in the air, sweet and mocking. Her father's voice echoed in her mind, sharp and dismissive. Your Grace requires nothing but an heir. Be grateful a man of his standing would take you. Seraphine looked at her reflection, pale skin, eyes too large, shadowed by sleepless nights, a woman trained to endure quietly. She reached for the silk robe laid across the bed, Valencian lace, seed pearls, worth a fortune, draped upon a sacrifice. The door opened softly. She did not turn at first. She did not need to. She felt him. The Duke entered, still dressed in black evening wear, his jacket removed, but everything else immaculate. His cravat sat perfectly at his throat, like armor made of cloth. He paused just inside the room, surveying it as if assessing a property, rather than entering a shared space. Lady Seraphine, he said. Her name sounded formal in his mouth, distant. Your Grace, she replied quietly. He crossed to the sideboard and poured himself a drink with precise movements. The crystal caught the firelight. Everything about him spoke of control, of discipline. When he turned back to her, his expression remained unreadable. I trust the chambers meet your expectations. They are magnificent. I am grateful. Gratitude is unnecessary, he said. This marriage is beneficial to both our houses. The words settled between them like frost. He took a measured sip. The hour is late. We should retire. Her throat tightened. Her fingers clenched around the silk robe. As you wish. He approached slowly. Each step echoed. When he stood before her, she caught the faint scent of sandalwood, and something sharper beneath it. He lifted his hand, stopping just short of touching her. May I? She nodded, unable to speak. His fingers brushed the tie at her collar. The silk loosened. She closed her eyes, bracing herself, willing her mind anywhere but here. The robe slipped from one shoulder. Then he froze. The room fell silent. Even the fire seemed to still. She opened her eyes. His gaze was no longer on her face. It was fixed on her shoulder. On the pale skin broken by thin silver lines. Scars. Old. Countless. Written into her flesh like a secret she had buried for years. Who did this to you? He asked. His voice was no longer cold. She moved quickly, pulling the silk back into place. It does not matter, Your Grace. It is long past. His hand stopped her, firm, not rough. Do not hide what I have already seen. She lifted her chin, dignity her last shield. Would you have me stand before you flawed and marked? I would have truth, he said quietly. If nothing else. His eyes darkened. Who caused these injuries? Her breath shook as she answered, "My father." The words fell heavy and final. "The Earl of Ashbury," she continued, voice steady despite the storm inside her. "He did not tolerate disobedience. Not even from his own daughter." Caspian turned away sharply, moving toward the window. Moonlight carved his rigid profile. His jaw tightened. "For what offense?" "I spoke against his gambling," she said. "I begged him to stop. For my mother, for the estate. He taught me that a daughter's place is obedience, not opinion." "And your mother?" "She died 3 winters ago." Silence stretched. When he spoke again, his voice was controlled but hard beneath the surface. "I am not your father." She watched him carefully. "In this house," he continued, "no hand will be raised against you, ever." Her heart beat painfully. "And when I displease you?" He turned back to her. His grey eyes held fire now. "I do not wish to manage you," he said. "I want a partner, not a servant." "You married without knowing me," she said softly. "I was purchased." "I married for alliance," he admitted. "Had I known what sort of man your father was, I would have removed you from his house at once." Her breath caught. "You are not repulsed?" "By him," he said. "Yes, by you, never." He stepped closer, slowly, giving her time to retreat. She did not. His fingers touched her shoulder, tracing one scar with a gentleness that made her tremble. "These marks speak of survival," he said. "Not shame." She whispered, "What of your rights?" "There will be time for duty," he replied. "Tonight, I wish only to know my wife." He stepped back and retrieved his jacket. "I will sleep in the adjoining chamber," he said. "Nothing will be taken that is not freely given." She stared at him, stunned. At the door he paused. "Rest well, Duchess. Tomorrow begins differently." The door closed softly. Seraphine stood alone, heart pounding, the fire crackling beside her. Something unfamiliar stirred in her chest. Not fear, not despair. Hope. For the first time in years, the scars beneath silk and lace no longer felt like a curse. They felt seen. Morning light crept into the chamber like a cautious guest. Seraphine woke slowly, confusion giving way to memory. Her hand flew to her shoulder, fingers resting over the scars she had spent years hiding. He knew. The Duke knew. Yet the terror she expected did not return. Instead, there was a strange stillness inside her, as if something long clenched had finally loosened. She rose and wrapped herself in her robe, moving to the window. Below, the gardens of Westland House lay in perfect order, trimmed hedges, gravel paths, everything controlled, much like the man who ruled it. At breakfast, his chair remained empty. The butler informed her that the Duke had left at dawn for his club and would return in the evening. Relief and disappointment tangled inside her. She did not know which feeling frightened her more. She spent the day wandering the vast house. The library smelled of old leather and dust, shelves rising higher than she could reach. The music room held a polished pianoforte untouched by recent hands. Portraits of stern men and composed women followed her with painted eyes. She felt like an intruder in a life purchased but not yet claimed. Late afternoon sunlight filtered into the conservatory as she paused among exotic flowers. That was where he found her. Caspian stood in the doorway, riding coat still on, cravat loosened. The formality of the previous night was gone, replaced by something quieter. "I am told you have been exploring," he said. "Yes, Your Grace." He frowned slightly. "Caspian, when we are alone." She nodded. "Caspian. You look like a guest awaiting permission," he observed. "I am," she replied honestly, "a duchess by title only." He stepped closer. "This house is yours. Only so long as you allow it." He studied her, then reached into his coat and handed her a folded letter. Her father's crest glared up at her from the page. Her hands trembled as she read. "He wishes to visit," she whispered, "to ensure the marriage was completed. Read my reply." Below her father's demand were a few firm lines in Caspian's hand. "The Duchess of Westland is under my protection. You will not cross this threshold. Her breath caught. You would deny him? I would deny any man who harmed my wife. He will rage, she warned. He will speak against you. Let him, Caspian said calmly. My position can withstand his noise. She looked at him, truly looked. Why do this for me? Because I have seen enough. He reached out, fingers hovering near her collar. May I? Her heart pounded, but she nodded. He undid the top button of her gown, revealing the edge of a scar. Instead of recoiling, he bent and pressed his lips gently to the marked skin. Perfect, he murmured. Tears blurred her vision, not from pain, from release. That evening, London buzzed with whispers. The Duke had barred the Earl of Ashbury from his home. Society watched closely when Seraphine appeared at her first musical as Duchess of Westland, wearing midnight blue silk and the ancient sapphires of her new house. Her father approached her with a false smile. How well you wear your new title. My husband ensures my comfort, she replied evenly. Caspian's voice cut in behind her. Indeed. The Earl bristled. A father still has concern for his daughter. A true father does, Caspian replied. You forfeited that claim. Gasps rippled through the room. Later, as the waltz began, Caspian offered his hand. Would you dance with me? As they moved together, his hand steady at her back, Seraphine felt something shift. The watching eyes no longer judged, they witnessed. You were brave, he whispered. I was terrified. Yet you stood. That night, back in their chambers, she stood before him with quiet resolve. I would have you see all of me, she said. He did not rush her. He did not command. As the silk fell away, the scars were revealed fully. He knelt before her, pressing reverent kisses to each mark. These are not wounds, he said. They are proof. When they finally came together, it was not duty that bound them, but choice. For the first time, Seraphine slept without fear. Dawn arrived softly, spilling pale gold across the bedchamber. Seraphine woke to the steady warmth of Caspian's arm around her waist. For a moment she lay still, afraid the peace would shatter if she moved. This feeling was unfamiliar. Safety, not borrowed, not imagined, real. She turned slightly, studying his face in sleep. The lines that made him seem severe to the world softened now. This was the man who had stepped back when he could have claimed. The man who had knelt before her scars and called them proof, not damage. You are staring, he murmured without opening his eyes. I am learning, she replied softly. He opened his eyes, grey, warmed by morning light. And what have you discovered? That fear can leave a room, she said, if given permission. He brushed a thumb along her cheek. It will never be invited back here. They took breakfast together in her sitting room, not the grand dining hall. The intimacy of it felt more binding than any vow spoken before witnesses. Tea was poured, bread broken. Conversation shared without masks. I have made arrangements, Caspian said carefully. We will leave London. She looked up. Leave? For the country, Dunley Park. Away from eyes and whispers. Away from him. Understanding bloomed. You wish to place distance between my father and me. I wish to give us space, he corrected. Time to become what we choose. Her fingers tightened around her cup, then she nodded. Yes, I would like that. They departed the next morning. As the carriage rolled away from London, Seraphine watched the city fade. The weight she had carried since girlhood loosened mile by mile. Fields replaced stone. Air replaced pressure. Dunley Park rose from the hills like a promise. Golden stone warmed by sunlight. Ancient trees guarding its borders. When she stepped down from the carriage, servants waited, eyes curious but respectful. This is your home, Caspian said quietly. She felt it, in her bones. Days passed gently, walks by the lake, evenings spent reading aloud, silence shared without fear. For the first time she wore gowns without high collars. The world did not end, no hand struck, no voice demanded obedience. One afternoon Caspian brought her news. I now hold your father's debts, he said plainly. Her breath caught. What does that mean? "It means his future rests in our hands," he replied. "In yours." The choice pressed heavily on her. She thought of the riding crop, the cold rooms, the silence after. She also thought of the woman she was becoming. "I do not wish to destroy him," she said at last. "I wish to end his power over me." Caspian nodded. "Then it shall be so." That night, when he came to her chamber, it was with tenderness that asked, rather than claimed. They came together not as Duke and Duchess, but as two souls choosing one another without fear. Seasons turned. London's whispers faded, new ones rose. The Duke of Westland was devoted to his wife. The Duchess walked with her head high. The Earl of Ashbury paid his debts quietly, his power broken not by ruin but by loss of control. Winter arrived with soft snow. Seraphine stood in the nursery one morning, one hand resting over the gentle curve of her belly. "You should be resting," Caspian said, concern threading his voice. "I am," she smiled. "I am home." He joined her, his hand covering hers. "We will raise our child differently." "Yes," she said, "with truth. With gentleness." Snow fell outside, blanketing the world in clean white. Inside, warmth held. Months later, when the portrait was painted, Seraphine wore a gown that left her shoulders bare. The scars were visible, unhidden, unashamed. Caspian stood beside her, one hand on her waist, the other holding their child. When asked why she did not conceal them, she answered simply, "Because they are part of the story." And it was a story no longer ruled by fear. The wedding night had begun as a cold duty. But it ended as a beginning built on choice, truth and love that did not demand perfection. Only courage.